Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Puja Guha. Puja grew up and has worked all over the world, something which she channels into her writing, incorporating settings from New York to Madagascar to Iran. So far, she has published 4 spy thrillers, an international family drama, and a psychological thriller. Her spy thriller series, The Araman Legacy, is an Amazon bestseller. The series begins with The Spirit of Destruction, in which former spy Petra Shirazi comes face to face with the Ahriman, a deadly Iranian assassin named for the Persian spirit of destruction. The rest of the series follows their adventures together, and in the most recent book, Beckoning from the Shadows, they become embroiled in a power struggle with Chinese intelligence that begins in Paris and culminates in the African Great Lakes region. Her recent psychological thriller, Sirens of Memory, was named one of the best crime fictions books of 2021 by Diverse Voices Book Review. Welcome, Puja.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. And I'm sorry I'm stumbling all over all those words, but there, we got them. I got most of them out. That's about my success level these days. Okay, well, so first of all, you have so many things to talk about. It's super exciting. Start by talking to us about The Spirit of Destruction.
Oh, absolutely. Do you mean in terms of plot, where the idea
just tell
came
us
from?
like a little teaser. We'll get to that. I want to hear about that too. But let's just start with like, for your people who haven't read you yet, tell us about this book.
Okay, so this plot is basically, so Kuwait, which is where I grew up, has a very nuanced political system where you have a really progressive monarch and actually a democratically elected parliament that's much, much more conservative, super Islamist, in fact, sadly. And so they butt heads all the time. And then the emir, the monarch, fires them, and it goes back and forth. And the idea was just like, why wouldn't a member of the Islamist faction hire an assassin to take out the emir? So that was the central teaser for the book. And then the stakes kind of get bigger and bigger as it's involving a major oil deal and interests from Iran and different power struggles and things like that.
Right. Well, so tell us about how, the idea obviously came from this, from your real life experience growing up in Kuwait. But how did Petra come to you? And, sort of how did you develop her?
She just showed up. It was like she wasn't there. And then I started initially just putting some thoughts on paper about the plot that I was just talking about, with, the political factions and things like that. And then it's like, oh, who's going to be the heroine? And I always hero or heroine, I guess at that point it was. And I just knew it was going to be her. I knew I wanted to work with a lead female character. I think that was always there, but she just appeared to me as this mixed race, grew up in Kuwait like me, but was also from this Iranian background.
Yeah, she's got a complicated mix of history as well. And sort of as you were writing it, like what were your sort of favorite discoveries you made about it? I mean, no spoilers, but can you tell us a few things that you're like, oh my God, that's so great. I love that she does that. Because I do feel like it's funny that you said like she was just there. And it's true. Like, I think oftentimes we don't like sit down and manufacture a character. They somehow come at least partially formed to the page. And you're like, wow, where the hell did she come from? So I just want to hear, like, as you got to know her, what are some of your favorite things about her if she was like a girlfriend?
I love that she kicks ass, but she's also vulnerable. Yeah. She's not, just a robot or something like that. And she's had her own fair share of trauma that she's dealt with in different ways. And despite sort of trying to leave this kind of spycraft life behind, she's very motivated by this idea of the greater good and what that could mean.
Right. Right. Yeah. And did Petra come to you first, or am I going to mispronounce his name? Qasim?
Qasim.
Qasim?
They came to me basically at the same time. That,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, in a way, they sort of have, they have some similarities in their backgrounds. They're a little bit character mirror-ish at some points, which
Mm-hmm.
I only realized after.
Yeah.
But they sort of appeared to me at the same time, and then helped push each other's development as I got to know them both together.
As you wrote this book, are you somebody who plots out the story? Like, tell us about your process.
So this is one of the craziest things I've had to realize, book by book. So with that first book, and I thought this would be my process after that, but that first book, I didn't plot at all. I just sat down, wrote, and every day more developed and more came to me. And I did, of course, do a lot of revision work, as we all do.
We all do. Yeah.
Especially working with the timelines and things like that, just to make sure that I didn't have any inconsistencies and that everything lined up, and wasn't too confusing for a reader. And I thought that I would be a pantser throughout my process. And with each book, sadly, it's been different. Sorry,
Okay.
there's a garbage truck outside. They're so loud.
So tell us what you mean by that. Like, yeah, what do you mean by, how has it been different, and what, how has it evolved? So like, what was the second book like? I'm curious to know if there's like, if you can identify that there's you're moving closer to something else, or just,
I think at this point, I would say it varies book by book. So with the second book, I started out mostly pantsing, and then I plotted out the last probably like 30,000 words or so. So the last third-ish, maybe a little bit more than a third. And then with the following book, plotted a little bit more. And then with the fourth book in the series, I plotted the whole thing, thinking, okay, I'm moving in that direction. This is how it's working. And then I started writing it, and I had to throw that whole outline out the window. So, and then kind of ended up in this in-between process where I would write some and then go back to the storyboard and go back and forth.
Yeah.
And my standalone Sirens of Memory, I completely plotted that one and stuck to it. So
yeah,
I have now
accepted. Right. You're like, there's no rule. I hate that there's no rule. I think that I find myself more on the like, I have an idea and I kind of plot out some things, but I do find that if the whole thing's plotted, it's less interesting to write. There's so much magic to discover as you're working in the book that I kind of am like, I don't really want to know everything that's going to happen. I'd much rather just know enough to kind of get me to the next place. So so briefly tell our listeners, if you can, sort of a bit about the rest of the books in the series, because it's good for people to know sort of that there's so much. I mean, when somebody loves a book, they're always happy to hear that it's a series.
Absolutely. So in the second book, Petra and Qasim essentially have to work together. He starts off in exile, and she has to kind of draw him back in, and they have to work together to stop a terrorist plot that is arising from a Russian mole within the agency. And then, so that story starts out in Paris and then moves from New York to DC. The third book in the series has a really good friend of Petra's, who's a supporting character in the first book, Carlos. He asks her to help him bring a illicit arms dealer to justice, who was responsible for the death of a close friend of his when he was on an operation 10 years before. And So in that process, she gets involved, and then Qasim gets involved. And then this most recent book, not the final book, the most recent book has them trying to hunt down that same mole from the second book, and after he's escaped, basically. And so the mole goes into hiding in Burundi, in the African Great Lakes, East African region. And so they show up there to hunt him down, and they realize that he's there as part of a much bigger plot, which involves a military coup attempt that the Chinese are about to orchestrate to make sure they get this big infrastructure power deal.
Wow. Wow, I love it. So there's you got the continuing characters, and then you've got new characters who bring in sort of new issues and problems. I love that. So you're an indie author, right? It sounds like, is the fourth book in the series out yet?
Yes, it came out in January.
You've got 5 published books.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sort of finished your first book, what was the process? Did you submit to agents and publishers, or did you decide, I want to do this on my own? Because people are doing so well with self-publishing.
Yeah. So I have 5 thrillers and then 1 standalone that's a family drama, which also is indie. One of my thrillers, the standalone, that one's traditionally published. But when I wrote the first book, The Spirit of Destruction, so I didn't know anything about the industry. Self-publishing was starting to become bigger, but hadn't really made nearly as much of a dent as it has now. But I thought about going the agent traditional publishing route, but not knowing anything about the industry, I didn't realize there was this whole query process. So just kind of through a friend of a friend got connected to an agent, and she read an earlier draft of The Spirit of Destruction, and she said, I like the book. She gave me some great feedback, which I'm super grateful for. And but then she was like, I just don't really think that there's going to be a lot of appetite for such an international plot in the American publishing world. And knowing what I know now about the industry, I wouldn't necessarily take one agent's word as the be all end all,
right.
In this case, I did. And so I was initially advised, like, oh, you should just write another book. Don't publish this. And I was like, that seems very silly, because I think there's something here. And so I started doing more investigating on self-publishing. I found an editor through the Maryland Writers Association, which was absolutely essential.
Yes.
It was great. And then just kind of figured it out step by step, which was very challenging. Definitely didn't know what I was doing. And arguably I'm still figuring a lot of it out. But I'm really glad that I didn't just
set
stop
it aside
writing that series. I really enjoy it, and I love those characters, and I think at this point now have developed a pretty good reader base and that kind of thing.
That's great. Well, good. I love it. I love the stories where it was like, nope, that's not the way I want to do it. Versus I think a lot of people self-publish as an option too, because they get a lot of rejection, and then they, and I think there's a lot of benefits to it, I think, but it is a lot of work. I mean, the amount of work you have to do as a indie author is substantial. And do you also work?
I do. So it's not a regular hour day job, although it does take up a ton of time. So I do freelance consulting work for primarily the World Banks, but I do international development type projects. We work on, the World Bank does lots of things, but the stuff I work on has to do with small business development. I started out working all over Africa, and then now I have a few projects in South America as well. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't give it up. It's definitely within the author community, everybody's sort of expecting, like, oh, when are you going to give up your day job? And it's not really how I think about it. I'd probably scale things back a little bit, just have a little bit more on time. But really like the work and I
Yeah.
love the travel.
Yeah.
Although
How I know. So how often do you travel for that?
so post COVID, it's less predictable. So before it used to be, well, I mean, actually, it's run the gamut. So back um, up until we moved to Colorado, that was back in 2019. I used to do about 2 or 3 big trips a year, but those would be 6 to 7 weeks each.
Oh my
I
gosh. Yeah.
don't really like doing such long trips anymore.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
it's more like 2, maximum 3 weeks. And uh, there'll be 3 to 4 of them per year ish. But
Yeah.
post COVID, that schedule is really all over the place. Everybody's realized how much you can get done without
Yeah,
travel.
without, yeah, yeah. And are you, I mean, like, these are your projects that are Africa or South America, or is that where you're going?
Yeah, yeah. So right
Doesn't
now
sound
my
terrible.
yeah, yeah. No, I have a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
there's something amazing about every place, and I've really gotten to explore a lot of stuff that's
Yeah.
not touristy and very much
Right.
off the radar. Like Burundi wouldn't be on most people's tourism list, but I absolutely fell in love with that country.
Yeah. I don't even know that country.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and it's very small. Just so in East Africa, you have several very
Yeah.
large lakes, and the bigger countries are Uganda,
Yeah.
Tanzania. Those are all down that strip of the Great Lakes region. But Rwanda and Burundi, both smaller countries.
Yeah. I've heard of Rwanda. I mean, I
Yeah.
just that's crazy that there's countries I haven't heard of. Not that crazy, I guess. I do live most of the time in the basement. So that brings me to another question. Like, so for these books,
Mhm.
how, I mean, there has to be a lot of research. So how much, I mean, and of course we all know that's fiction, which means you get to twist and turn a lot of rules and make up your own stuff. But how did you do your research, and how much of it is, and how much of the stories are sort of historically based, or based in the reality, and how much of it is poetic license?
So a lot of it is based in reality, but one of the things, especially with this series, with the Ahriman Legacy series, I did set it near future to when the books came out, and so that
Hmm.
gave me a little bit more creative license to set
Yes.
it up. So the history to publication date is broadly in alignment, and then XYZ happens after that. So, for example, in Madagascar, where half the third books takes place, I had been out there to work on setting up a solar plant, and Madagascar, like many African countries, has a power crisis. And
Hmm.
so, in the lead up in the book, I said that they kind of solved this problem and had developed the beachfront region where we were trying to develop our power plant, because that gave me a little bit more, just simple things like functional
Yeah.
roads, um, a,
Yes. Right.
the ability for tourists to get to these places. I mean,
Cell
it's absolutely
service.
stunning, but
Right. The ability
um,
to use a phone. Yeah.
yeah,
I can
for sure.
totally see that. That is true. And sometimes, yeah, you're like, I'm sorry, but that road closure is not going to work for my book. And you have to just be like, we're opening it. That is so, it is so interesting. And I think it sounds like a lot of fun. So you must have, I mean, clearly you know a lot because of your work experience and your also how you grew up. But there, what about like the sort of weaponry and the agency stuff? Did you have somebody help you? Did you kind of like invented in a way, we all seen enough TV shows to give it things a guess, but how did
Mhm.
that work for you?
It's a mix of things. So definitely a chunk of online research, talking to people. People are
Yeah.
surprisingly willing to talk, as long as they're anonymous and they don't actually have to tell you about operational details. And then there's
Right.
been podcasts and things like that, more and
Mhm.
more, that give you little bits of flavor. And then I also, so I called my spy organization the agency, and it's not the CIA. It's a
Right.
And so that gave me a little bit more license too.
Totally. Yeah. Because the CIA has been written about a lot. So we know too much about those guys anyway. So that's super exciting. So, okay. Tell me, well, we sort of talked about this a little bit, but I guess, if you can talk about what, the biggest challenges to, being an indie author, and then what you like about it. Because I think we don't hear from a lot of indie authors, and I think it's good to know sort of the ups and downs of it, the pros and cons.
So the most difficult thing was just the amount you have to learn about, for sure. So it's just like, okay, so you have to figure out little things like cover and formatting. And a lot of those, they're actually much better tools now for formatting than when I started, for example. But and finding an editor, but then you also have to figure out all this marketing stuff, and I think to a large extent, authors, we do quite a bit of our own marketing now anyway,
Right.
you're really down in the weeds with a lot of the stuff, as an indie author, like setting up Amazon keywords and ads, and ideally the ones who are the most successful, you're going back to those every few weeks and tweaking and updating and things like that, and doing a lot of tests of changing your book description, seeing what converts and that kind of thing. The second part of your question was sort of like, what have I learned, right? Is that?
No, what do you like about it? What's great?
Okay.
What's nice about being an indie author?
I really like that I've been able to write about what I want. And I think the direction of the industry has moved a little bit to allow more international flavor and more diversity and things like that. But I'm not constrained by, and I don't want to sound glib, but like, this isn't relevant to a Western audience enough or something like that. Because I found that readers are actually pretty interested in.
And I just sort of disagree with your agent, or the agent you spoke to. I think there's so much interest in it, and maybe it was different, in a few years ago, but I feel like you're in a beautiful spot, and this kind of, all the foreign experiences, and somebody whose life was so different, like growing up in Kuwait that's not many of us know somebody who did that. So I think it's wonderfully fun to read about. So I disagree with her. I think she's probably an idiot, but I don't know her, so I won't. Sorry, but you don't give us her name, because I don't want to.
No, absolutely not.
But and then so I want to ask, like, what is next? What are you? Sounds like you're going to continue the series. Are you going to try writing another standalone as well, or are you on the series is sort of your love right now?
So I have one more book in the series for sure.
Okay.
So that book's written, and I just actually finished the first revision last week, so that's exciting. So that'll come out probably towards the end of the year, realistically, with editing timelines and getting everything planned. And then I have a new book that is the start of another series, which is totally different. It's alternate history conspiracy. It takes place in 1991 is when it would start, and then we'll see. I know the setting of the second book of that series, but I don't know anything else yet.
Got it. And do you think and how will you handle that? Will you talk to agents about it, or will you just like, I love my indie life and I'm just going to stick there?
I think for that one, I'm not going to query, because I think it's great, and it has given a lot of wonderful results to many, many people. So I don't want to make that sound like, but I'm not going to query. I will be going to a couple of conventions this year, Left Coast and Thriller Fest for sure. And in that time frame, if I meet an agent who's interested, and wants to read the book or read part of the book, and things progress from there, I'll definitely be open to that angle. But if that doesn't happen that way, I think I've got a pretty good route going forward.
Great. That's fantastic. Well, okay, so you have 4 books in the Ahriman legacy story, and a 5th one coming out this year. And tell us the name of your standalone. Oh, I knew that already. What was the name of your standalone thriller?
Sirens of Memory.
Okay, that's right. Sirens of Memory. Well, okay, so and also tell our listeners where to find you. Obviously, the book's available on Amazon. Do you have a website? You're on Instagram or Facebook? Where do people find you?
So I have a website, pujaguha.com. I also am on well, not TikTok, at least not at this moment. I
Oh my
am
God.
on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I've gone through phases where I'm super duper inactive, and right now a little bit more active. I don't know where that will level out. We'll see. But either way, I mean, I definitely respond to messages or, posts where I'm tagged or whatever.
Fantastic. I know we need to do like a TikTok. We need to get together and have like a TikTok tutorial, because I feel way too old for TikTok, but I do I watched like Geneva Rose do it, and I'm like, that woman, I'm just gonna be like, Geneva, can you throw one my way once in a while? Just make a TikTok for me. But anyway, I totally get that. Well, it was really fun to talk to you. I'm so excited that there are more books in the series. I love Petra. I'm going to mess up his name one more time.
Qasim?
Yeah, Qasim. Why is that not sticking in my brain? Anyway, I love them both, and I love sort of their dynamics. So this is really fun, and I look forward to the more books in the series. And I was really fun to chat with you today, Puja.
Thank you so much. It was such a great time. Will I get to see you at any of the conventions later this year?
I'll be at Thriller Fest.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll be there. So we'll meet up and have a glass of wine and celebrate. So thank you for joining me, and everybody who's listening. This has been Killer Women with Puja Guha, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.